All right. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Restaurantopia. In this episode, we're going to talk about aces and places, and we're going to go through reasons why this is very important to have the right people in the right seat in your restaurant, and also setting people up for 100% success from the beginning, from onboarding to training to all those things, and why maybe some of the negatives of having the right person in the right place without knowing actually what they want long term as an employee. And then we'll also, talk a little bit about, some what ifs, because Babe Ruth was a pitcher. So I think you'll enjoy this. So here we go. Imagine a perfect world where you can build a restaurant, open the doors, and make loads of money. Unfortunately, those days are over. It takes great leadership, hard work, and long hours to operate a successful restaurant. Together, we can make it happen. This is Restaurantopia.
All right, welcome back to Restaurantopia. So happy to have everyone here with us today. More importantly, near and dear to Anthony and I's heart is Dave Ross is back making an appearance. He will be back consistently to all the hate mail that we received because he was not on last week's episode. He is back permanently now. We re-upped his contract. There's some arbitration that went on, but we were able to get him back fully engaged.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh, that's true. My inbox is flooded. I haven't even opened all the complaints yet.
I think I have some ransomware on there now because of this.
You got Bitcoins? You got to buy your way out with Bitcoins.
I hope not. All right. Dave Ross, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic.
Good. All right.
I'm excited. I'm really excited about this episode, honestly. This is going to be really good.
All right, Anthony, how are you doing?
Having a great hair day, brother. Everything else just falls in line after that.
Oh, that's one thing this episode's known for.
Yeah. It's the hair.
Yeah. So just like always, Anthony's, put together some great notes for the show that'll be in the show notes, hence notes for the show and the show notes, which makes sense. And we're going to talk about aces and places today. So talk about, as an owner and operator or manager of a restaurant, what you need to do to make sure that the correct people are in the correct spot, doing the right things, set up for success. And we're going to go through this. I think this will be an impactful, 20 minutes or so to give you some nuggets on how to achieve that. Because I think a lot of times there's plenty of potential in everybody, but when you're sports soccer and your dad's got you playing football, there's always can be some issues. So we just want to talk about that because it's an important notion. So
Anthony, let's hit it.
Yeah, listen, man. Aces and places is something I've subscribed to for a long time, something I firmly believe in. But there's a downside to it. I can't wait to talk about either because you see all this inspirational fodder about aces and places. Make sure you have your people in the right place, which I 100% subscribe to. There's a time and a place for that, believe it or not, which we'll get to. But listen, when I was doing my research for this and I came across this first line in our notes and it says, what if Babe Ruth stayed a pitcher and never got his chance to hit, right? And I thought that was like the most profound thing ever because Babe Ruth was a pitcher, and what if his bosses never gave him an opportunity to surpass that mediocre pitcher status? I mean, would the guy hit 714 home runs? Would he have his place in the annals of time and baseball history? That sort of stuff. So I looked at that and said, my God, like what if, or what could have been? And then you look at your experience as a manager, which we all have had some capacity, and said, how many opportunities have we passed up for our employees because we didn't think they were a good fit, because we never gave them the opportunity? How much did we miss out on from those individuals, and what could we have done differently? And that's really what I want to dive in today. And Dave, especially like this topic, because it's something you and I spoke about maybe a couple weeks ago. I think I heard an alarm go off on your phone. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm going through a process recently where, my mentality towards work and towards my career and everything is like, as I've grown through the company, I always wanted to know how to do everything. And I always wanted to be the guy who had all the answers, and I wanted to excel and just be the guy people came to that knew everything. And then as that happened, and as I've grown in the company, like it became almost daunting because all of a sudden everybody starts coming to you. I got what I asked for, you know what I mean? And so I've been going through a process, recently where I'm literally, I've got every half an hour, I've got an alarm that goes off on my phone the last week, and I'm journaling basically the last half hour to hour of what I did. And then I'm going through and I'm making a list, and then I'm going to go through and go, okay, should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? You know what I mean? And if I should, I'll keep it. If not, then I can figure out, okay, if I'm not going to do it, then who is? I think that as we go through the episode here, you'll see like, you really got to figure out, like, if you're the owner and operator, general manager, or whatever it is of authority in the restaurant, like when you've got things like when you're taking the trash out, or you're cleaning, or you're doing the dishes, or you're doing all this stuff, like, sometimes you got to step back and go, okay, is this really where I should be spending my time? What can I do to utilize my team to make sure that I'm freed up to be the leader and captain, move the ship forward? So
This is one of the most difficult things, though, a founder or an entrepreneur has to deal with. Because I think I'm programmed like you are. Like, I feel like I just rather do it than delegate it. I'd rather work 12 hours or 14 hours than 10 and then have to go back and redo someone's work. And that's the toxic mindset that you get into versus you teach someone how to do it, you train them up, and then that's off your plate.
And it's not healthy because it really, and I hate to say this, because sometimes it comes down to ego. You're like, well, I'm good at this. I can get it done in 5 minutes. If I give it to him, it's going to take him an hour. But that's okay. Like, it used to take me an hour. You know what I mean? And I got it to 5, you know what I mean? So it's not fair to not have that person have the opportunity to learn and grow and become proficient as you are, you know what I mean? Especially when it's something that, I mean, when you write it down and you start looking at it and you're like, okay, why am I doing that? You know what I mean? Like, it's
like
powerful.
Dishes, laundry, mowing the yard, all that stuff.
Yeah. Like taking showers, combing your hair,
No, Anthony, but do you see this? I see this all the time now in the kitchen, but I see the chef injecting himself into making every single item in the kitchen, and then you got 5 people on dishwashing duty. It's like, no, like, you need to start using your team, delegating tasks. Can they make the sauce as good as you? To Dave's point, no, probably not at first, but you get better. And
well, I think, Brian, what you're talking about here is 2 things, and I don't mean to sound harsh and abrasive, and trust me, for anybody listening, I throw myself in the same mix. Yeah, bring it. Man, it's a loser mentality. It really is.
Oh, true.
And it's poor leadership, because it's essentially saying you don't trust the people that you vetted, you hired, you onboarded, you trained. You don't trust them. Also, too, it speaks volumes of your system. What kind of system do you have if the people under you can't replicate it, right? If you're the only one that can do it, I mean, I understand the mentality that you're talking about, the toxic mentality of, if you want it done it right, you got to do it yourself. But yeah, and we all feel that way initially, but the true transient leaders, or transcendent leaders, not transient leaders, the wrong word. Transcendent leaders are the ones who build the system to where, or they're either training properly, or their system's simple and effective enough to where anybody can do it in their absence. And I've always found that the best leaders are the ones that leave an organization and the organization doesn't suffer. Does that make sense? Meaning that they put the foundation in place and they put their people in power. They gotta subscribe to the 80-20 rule. And I know it applies in a lot of industries and a lot of different facets, but the fact is, most of the time your understudies are going to do the job to about 80% of the effectiveness that you're going to do it, for lack of expertise, lack of experience, or lack of buy-in, whatever the case may be. You got to somehow build that into your system and build that out of your system, or at least understand it and build it out of your system somehow. And it's not an easy task, but chefs specifically, Brian, tend to be alphas, right? And they tend to want to rule the roost, and it's how we're wired. It's hard to unwire a person like that.
And Anthony, you have to have situations going through, your growth as a chef and coming up, like where you've lived this. You have to have lived this, right?
Yeah, tons.
I mean, so at what point, like, was there a turning point for you, or is there something you figured out all of a sudden? It was like it clicked. It's like, man, what? Like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta do this differently. Or how did this happen for you? I think that could be a great connection.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's one instance in particular that I remember. I started a job when I was 25. It was my first management job. I got shot out of Canada as a sous chef, and I was all full of vigor and vim, right? Like, this is my ship. This is how we're going to do it. And the chef was getting married, and the owner was his brother-in-law. And I was like maybe on the job for 2 months. And they're like, you're going to do the chef's wedding here on premise. I'm like, okay, great. We had a very simple restaurant, and my staff was mostly high school kids. And I developed this like elaborate menu for the chef because I wanted to impress him. What I didn't realize is the rehearsal dinner was 18-hour day. The wedding itself was a 22-hour day, no lie. I went home and slept for 3 hours and came back and worked another 18, 19-hour day. The prep shifts before the rehearsal dinner, 14, 16 hours, 3 days in a row. I know chefs work a lot of hours, but that was ridiculous. Only to have the chef go on vacation because of its honeymoon, and rightfully so. Him and the owner were gone for another week and a half or so, where I worked another 80, 90 hours that week. And it was that point at 25 years old, I realized this is broken. Like, there's no way that this is a good way to do things, because yeah, the rehearsal dinner went off fine. The wedding went off fine. But what I didn't realize is I was so exhausted and so cynical on the back end of it, that I was making piss poor decisions. I was tired. I didn't care. I was making decisions to survive, not making decisions to thrive. And I think there's an important distinction between those two. That's really the turning point for me, Dave, is when I looked at that, I took a step back and said, you know what? I don't want to do this again. This is ridiculous. I abused myself for no good reason. The results weren't that great. I had diminishing utility on it, quite frankly, because I was working too much. So my quality of work suffered. I would have been better off delegating the whole way through, taking it easy, getting good sleep. Brian, you mentioned something about being a general. I'm a firm believer now in my afterlife of the industry. The general is really never got dirty, right? Except for maybe George Washington crossing the Potomac. The general sits on top of the hill and surveys the battlefield. The general is not down in the trenches. The general is making high-level strategic decisions to make sure everybody's in the right position. I didn't do that. I was leading the charge like Braveheart, and we all saw what happened to Braveheart, right?
And that's an interesting, like the way when I think about that story you just described, it's interesting because you had the owner and the chef, and then I'm assuming you were the third in command. Yeah. Was that fair? Yeah. So you had the owner and the chef, and I don't know what their mentality was, but they felt comfortable with allowing you to run that gig. Well, why they were, well, of course. I mean, there's no question they made a good decision on who should handle it.
Yeah.
But your level, you know what I mean? Like it didn't continue to flow. We also got to think about in the organizations too, is if you're the owner, let's say, and you're allowing your GMs and your managers and your chefs and things, and you're giving them, but are they doing the same? Like, are you, I say like, it's not that it's easy, but it's easy to manage an employee, but to manage a manager is a whole different ballgame. You know what I mean? And those of you that, have gone through this know exactly what I'm talking about. Like for you to manage somebody that's managing people is a whole nother thing. So now they allowed you to have that experience and said, okay, we trust Anthony to do this. Did they set you up for success to say, okay, now here's how you manage the bottom? Now I know like we always want to come back, and that's a good feeling to come back and say like, it's on me. Like I screwed it up. I didn't do it. You know what I mean? But what did they do as your leader and manager? And we got to think about that too. So there's levels. It works all the way down,
Yeah, it should definitely trickle down. And I would argue, listen, we were all young at the point in time, and it was their first ownership. And I've seen these guys go on to have raving success afterwards. Mm-hmm. No, the system was completely broken. There was no trickle down responsibilities, and when we developed the menu for this particular thing, it was a menu that the staff was largely incapable of preparing at their skill level. We didn't think that through. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer. I would rather have a perfectly executed grilled cheese sandwich rather than a poorly executed, beef Wellington, right? So had we dialed the menu back and thought through our strategy a little better and say, okay, how can we get these guys to achieve this menu at 100% execution? The guests would appreciate it more, the staff would appreciate it more, and I would have appreciated it more. And ultimately at the end, the results would have been much more amicable to the situation. But we were over ambitious, and we all learned a really stark lesson that day. It was painful, absolutely painful.
So, okay. So I'm thinking through this. I'm like, well, how do we assess the team to know what their strengths and weaknesses are? Like, have you guys done this in the past where you look and you say, okay, here's my players. Here's the criterias, and then here's 1 to 5, like how they rank. And then I know what I need to do. What I'm going through right now is like, I'm going through and listing all the things out that I feel like I shouldn't be doing. And then I'm going to put names next to them of who I feel should. But if I have gaps of like, okay, you know what? Like this is something I really shouldn't be doing, but I don't know if I have somebody right now. You know what I mean? So do I need to train somebody up? Do I need to create a position? Do I need to, do I need to hire somebody? And I think the same thing can happen, in that restaurant as well, especially right now, because it's tough to get people, like you may be short staffed. So it may not be, that there's not somebody capable of doing it. There may not be enough hours for somebody to do it. You know what I mean? So, and I feel like it's, as a leader, like it's always okay to roll up your sleeves and get down in there and do it. You know what I mean? When you have to, but it shouldn't be the norm. This should not be something that this should not be something that happens. Yeah. It should not be something that happens on a daily, weekly, constant basis, but when you gotta, somebody calls off, whatever, and you got to jump in, like we all should be equipped to do that as leaders.
I love what you just said about the spreadsheet and ranking your players. I don't know that I've taken such an analytical approach to it, but my one thing that I'm pretty proud of what I did is I spent the time to get to know my people, and there was a vested interest in each one of their acceleration. And mentoring was something that I really latched onto and I really, really enjoy to this day. I asked them what they wanted to be, asked them what they wanted to do, and see if I could align that with the business needs too. And listen, my best grill cook might have been a great fry cook too, but I never gave them the opportunity because they were so good on grill. I never let them leave. And I kind of pigeonholed them, right? So then when you spend the time and ask them, like, yeah, grill's fine, but I'd rather work on fry, or I'd rather expo or something like that. It was kind of a compromise where it's like, okay, look, I'm going to put you on grill when I absolutely need you to be on grill. And we have the luxury of having a slower night, or I'm on the line, or there's a safety net in place on grill. I'm going to let you develop those other skills so you can get more cross training, more diversification in your portfolio, and eventually you can climb the ladder to where you want to be. I think so often in life with employees, we limit their capabilities because of our own bias, because of our own judgment, whether it's we need them on grill or whether we think they're so far away from the goal that they have for themselves that it's not even worth putting in the effort. But I think that's, again, it comes back to a loser mentality. And I wish I would have spent more time letting people develop into what they thought they could be, as opposed to thwarting them and injecting my own kind of authority on it, and giving them a little time, extra time to develop those skills. And I never did. I shouldn't say I never did. I did, but it wasn't as regular as I hoped, you know. And again, I said I worked on it a little bit, but just not to the extent that I wanted to. But, you know.
Yeah, and I think something that, like, you know, my mentors given me that I use all the time, and Anthony, I know you've heard this, and Brian, you probably heard it as well, is like, you know, when you're looking at your employees and you say, okay, what are you good at? You know what I mean? And what do you love to do? Mm-hmm. And if you can align those two things, they're good at it and they love to do it, you're probably going to have success. You know what I mean? And if you don't, you know, it's not, I mean, as the leader, like, what can you do? You told me you loved it. You told me you're good at it, but you're failing. You know what I mean? So either you lied to me, or, you know, something changed, you know, but that's really, when you think about that, and it's setting people up for success. And I know, Anthony, you've got a ton of passion about this. Like, how do we set our people up for 100% success from the beginning with clear expectations of what needs to be done? And, you know, cause that's the biggest thing. Like, we go back to, I think it was the episode on culture, you know, and we talked about, like, oh, just sign the manual, you know what I mean? And just get it back to me. So now you've got the signature. Now that means that they looked at the manual, and if they violate anything, you've got them dead to rights. That shouldn't be the mentality. It should be the manuals there actually as a guideline. I mean, this is how things should be done, and it should be clear and upfront. So
yeah, no, and that's that toxic behavior and toxic thinking that I think I just want to hit home on it. If you're not talking to your employee and you don't understand where they want to go and what they want to be, guess what's going to happen? They're going to go be that for somebody else. They're going to leave you. So then you're going to have the turnover. You're going to have the issue with finding new staff, and then you have to train someone else. Versus, I love, Anthony, what you said about, you know, sitting down with that employee and asking them, like, what do you want? That shows that their vision and your vision are in line, and you're moving forward in lockstep, versus this total disconnect. The employer doesn't care about me. The employer doesn't ask about me. I mean, I think in this softer, touchier, feely world that we live in now, it's no longer the kitchen that Anthony Bourdain grew up in. You really want to know people's feelings and opinions.
Yeah, I think that's important, and it's a competitive advantage because, again, you care for your employees, and the fact is, I always did. I mean, I love people. I'm a people person. I'm fascinated with their stories and their backgrounds and everything else. It's a shame when you feel used as an employee and they don't take a vested interest in what you're doing.
And someone working hard is not using them, but to show that you actually care about them. And then another thing from our mentor, employees will only take criticism and coaching from someone that they know that loves them. And I think he said that about a month ago, and I wrote it down. I was just so overwhelmed with the sense of, like, oh, that's why people in the past who have told me something, I get offended. And then he'll say the same exact thing and be like, fuck, I got to work on that. Like, oh, that does need a lot of work. Like, right. You know, whatever that issue is, but it's like not having that care and love for your employees that they know, and not that just you care about them, but that they think that you care about them.
No, the perception's reality. Like, you got to, you know, if you think that your boss or the owner or the manager or whatever it is, like, doesn't care about you, mm-hmm. Like, what do you care about them? Well, I mean, it's reciprocal. Like, if they don't feel loved or feel cared for, and if loved's like a word that you don't want to, you know, but I'm okay with it. But I mean, if some people are like, oh, love, like, do I have to love my employees? Like, they're not family, they're not, you know, but listen, at the end of the day, they're part of your business, they're part of your life. Like, there should be a level of care for these people. So if they don't feel that, it's tough to coach people. It's going to be very tough. You know what I
mean? And I worked at a large law firm one time, and I always used to say, if I had a heart attack or the computer crashed at the same time, the owners would have stepped over my lifeless body and making sure that I didn't lose any data. Like, is that brief done? Like where's he at? Did you hit save before you call 911? Hit save. And I always thought, like, that's when you have your employees.
What a horrible feeling, though. I mean, we kind of like we're making a joke of it, but it's a horrible feeling, man.
Yeah, but it's common. That's the problem. It's common. And I can relate to that. That's why it hits me, is because I think it's too rampant. But, you know, precisely why we have this show, right?
Exactly.
No, it is. And I think, so what happens is you get the employee who they pull into the parking lot, and we have a saying here at Hillcrest, which I love, is again, our mentor put forth, is we want you to race to work and race home to your family. And I'm using myself as an example at this law firm. I would pull up in the parking lot. Like, it's not like there was waiting for a song to play, or, like I was sitting in my car. I just physically could not open the door. I hated it so much. I hated and it was just the culture. Like, the work was just work. I mean, like, I can do anything. That I'm not afraid to work, but just the culture and the toxic nature of the environment. I could not open the door to get out of the car. I was like, oh, this is horrible.
It is
What
horrible.
did you do right afterwards?
Got out of the car and went to work. But
I was expecting something like I went in and I turned in my notice and I slammed it on the desk.
Oh,
and I left and it felt great.
my God. This story has no ending like that. I'm not even going to embellish, a little poetic license to punch it up for the podcast. No, I mean, ultimately, I found another opportunity. I left, went on an entrepreneurial journey to create a medical device. Like, I did leave, and I knew that was not the fit for me. And it wasn't the practice of law, because I obviously still do that, but it was the environment and that firm in particular.
Well, but you think about it, Brian, like, think of what you got out of the experience. If you never would have experienced that, like, you might not have some of the mentality and mindset you got now, because you learned, man, if I'm in this situation, like, I'm never doing it this way, and that's one thing. Sometimes when you have like a rough relationship with a manager or a boss or an owner, like, it's also your mindset of like, okay, this is happening for a reason, and I'm learning something through this. I got to take something away from this. I can't just be miserable.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like, I got to go, but I got to say, now we're talking to the employees now, but if you're in a situation where the culture is bad and all those things, we're not saying stick around and just, like, wallow in the mud, but there's some things you can take away from that to say, like, you know what, if I'm ever in this situation again, like, I'm not doing it this way,
Listen,
there's always takeaways.
Knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. And I cling on to an experience I had. It was a year and a half of misery, not quite as bad as Brian's, but it was an unmitigated failure of a restaurant opening for a year and a half. We just couldn't get it to click in the town we were in. And it humbled me to the extent that I'm almost proud of it now, because I went through it. It's not a badge of honor per se, but what it is I've been able to leverage that miserable experience into so many positives by being able to avoid those pitfalls that I already been in. So there's some truth to that. Like, I think any well-rounded individual has their share of bad experiences, and certainly you try to make sure you don't replicate those for your staff. Because I tell you, I grappled with a year and a half of depression and failure, and the woe is me and I'm not good enough sort of mentality. But it galvanized me, man, and it propelled me forward exponentially. I mean, the job I had after that, I used all that stuff, all those feathers in my cap, and I had an entirely different outcome on the other side of the spectrum, and it was amazing. And we were high on the hog for a long time. It was great. So, I don't know, Brian, if you had similar experience there, but I can tell you I did.
I have. I mean, I've had issues where my entrepreneurial journey, went sideways, and we had some difficulty, and then, you pivot and it turns out okay. Everything is kind of glorified looking back. We walked to school uphill both ways, and it's so amazing.
But 2 feet of snow.
Yeah. Oh, 2 to 3 feet of snow.
Yeah.
But when you're in it and you're suffering from the depression and you don't know where to turn, that's when you really have to step back and look at it. And it's like, what can I take away from this? How am I going to act in the future? And what can I do to not put myself in this situation again? Otherwise, it's all for naught. And again, I don't want people to look back at a situation like that and glorify it, but I don't want them to ignore it either. You need to learn from that and grow.
Yeah. Agreed wholeheartedly.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I know, Anthony, like let's talk. I want to spend a little time talking about the setting up for 100% success on the employees. I know you've done a lot on this because you're looking at launching a training program soon, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But I'd love for you to go into that. I think this is going to be super beneficial for managers and leaders.
Yeah, I think what it starts with, Dave, is that 100% kind of rings true. And we always accept less than 100% for some reason as restaurant operators. And I think what it means is setting your employees up for 100% success. It starts with the onboarding process. It starts with your orientation. Are you outlining the expectations of what's expected of these employees day in and day out clearly with their buy-off on? So you have this agreed set of crystal clear expectations. They know exactly what target to hit. And then during the training process, are you giving them the knowledge, information, and skill set they need to achieve that job at 100% effectiveness 100% of the time? And I would argue most of us, when we look back in the mirror, say, no, it's about 75, 80%, and we're okay with that. But I would challenge any manager to push it to 100%. And there's mechanisms and ways, and I can't give away the kit and caboodle now because I do have this training program launching soon, but it's along those lines. And then past the training, do your employees have the exact tools that they need to achieve the job? You know, you can go with the no more, no less mentality if you want, but I need to know my employees have the exact right tools, the right knives, the right spoons, the right portion scoops, the right coolers, the right stove, the right equipment. And if you follow that all the way through from start to finish, if you've done your job as an operator to ensure that employee has every resource at their disposal to achieve the job 100% of the time, then you should have no reason to fail or no reason not to hit that 100%. Again, the details in there are enormous, and it's a 3-hour conversation we need to have about that, but that's about the gist of it. And just thinking through your processes and saying, am I doing the best by my employees? And I gave this analogy, I think episode 1, episode 2, talking about the independent advantage and disadvantage. There's were times where I was short a dishwasher and I would reach out the back door and find some kids hanging out in the corner and see if anyone wanted to get paid that night, you know, check their pulse, make sure they're good, put them in the dish tank, and they'll fill out their paperwork on Monday. I didn't give those kids a 100% chance to succeed. And I wonder why they weren't great at their jobs. I heard a chef talking the other days. He said, throwing them in the fire is the best way to train him. He was talking about opening a concept. And he's like, yeah, we can't train everybody, so we'll just throw them to the fire, and my leaders will show them how to do it while on the job. And I thought, oh my God, like what? Yes, I get that mentality because that's the way it used to be, but you're setting yourself up for failure no matter what. That is not the best way to learn.
Not giving someone training is, again, not a badge of honor.
No, baptism by fire was a badge of honor, though. That's how we roll.
Listen, when you got a fillet and you put it through the meat grinder, like it's ground beef. You know what I mean? Like, so you can't turn it back into a fillet. Like, so what, to think that you're going to send somebody through the grinder and just go, well, just throw them in the river, see if they make it. Like, they might.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're not going to be a fillet. You know what I mean? They might be a nice burger. You know what I mean? But
you know what the beautiful thing about that is to steal a page out of Brian's book. I don't have to do the push-ups then. I'm putting it on the employee. Hey, sink or swim, buddy. Mm-hmm. And then I save myself time. But what I didn't realize is, I save myself some time on the front end, but on the back end, now all the fires I have to put out because I have an unhappy staff. I have an employee not, pulling their weight. I have inconsistent food. I have inconsistent prep and station setup, and the myriad of issues that happens on the back end of that. I would argue that I buried myself rather than save myself time. But the mentality is instant gratification. We need to get this off our desk right now. How do we plug this hole right now? We don't spend the time to pragmatically go through the process. We don't think 6 months from now. In restaurants, we work on 20-minute deadlines. Every ticket time's 20 minutes, right? And we get so short-sighted. It's hard to break that cycle, man. Real hard to break that cycle.
One is a macho mentality of like, just figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, well, that's how I did it. I just self-taught. Figured it all out. You know what I mean? Like, you'll get it. But it's a horrible way to manage people and lead.
You've been doing it wrong for 30 years. Good for you. That's 3 decades of your legacy.
And so what happens is these restaurants are operating at 75% of their potential, and a lot of operators are satisfied with that. But sometimes if you take a step back and improve your systems, you could get closer to that 100%. Now, listen, strive to achieve it with the realization you may never achieve it, so you don't go crazy. But 100% is attainable. You can do it. You just got to look in the mirror, and that's the hardest part.
Today, it could be the difference of you being in business or going out of business.
Today's
question.
Different competitive arena. Entirely different.
Question.
You don't get much slip up, especially when it comes to compliance with the health issues and everything else. It's tough.
In today's environment, you could get a COVID customer, you could get a COVID employee, your entire kitchen staff could get COVID. What are you going to do? You're going to be closed for 7 to 14 days. You're going to spend money on cleaning it. Is your organization big enough to absorb a hit like that? I would say most are not. So you really have to focus on this stuff and not just worry about it, but actually implement strategies that will alleviate the issues that are coming your way. Because I'm telling you what, they are definitely on their horizon.
And I think you have to plan for it to happen. I mean, you have to you can't be like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to say like, okay, this is going to happen. What am I going to do? I mean,
if you were going to climb a mountain, would you ever think not to check the ropes and the holdings and the fittings and make sure everything's secure? Like, no chance. No chance are you leaving that up for I guess chance is the other word I'm looking for. But you're not going to keep your fingers crossed while you're scaling Yosemite, unless you're Alex Arnold or whatever, but you're going to double check all that stuff. And
you're the king of obscure people. Like,
no, did you not watch that documentary?
No. If I did, I don't know the guy's name.
Oh my God. He was a rock climber. He scaled Yosemite free-handed. And
Wow.
they asked him how he did it. And he did it with ropes so many times that he knew all 6,700 places on the rock where he needed to put his hands and his feet. He knew every step of the process.
Is
He
this
said
the
he
free solo guy?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And,
Oh my God. I got dizzy just watching this documentary. And I'm on a 40-inch TV. It's not like it's, the IMAX. Like it was incredible.
It was
I got to
intense.
check that out. It's called Free Solo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to check that out.
So he did it enough times, Dave. He climbed this mountain enough times with ropes to where he could not get it wrong. And that's the training process, right? That we talk about is don't train till they get it right. Train till they can't get it wrong. And that's essentially what he did. He climbed it enough to where he wasn't scared of any portion of the rock face anymore. And then he could finally take off the ropes. And by the way, he scaled in record time too. And I'm not sure if because he was scared or there was adrenaline, but it only took him like 3 hours to climb Yosemite free-handed. It was insane. Yeah.
Well, if you don't already have that in your training presentation, I'd add that because that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
so I'm interested, like you said in the beginning, that there's some good and bad, and in the beginning of the episode, I want to understand where your head's at on that. Like, you know what I mean? Like what are you getting at with the contrast?
Right. Okay. So you're a grill cook and Brian's a fry cook. You guys are the absolute best at what you do.
Of course.
Well, of course, Brian, you're doing your best SpongeBob imitation there and being the best fry cook in the world. And I appreciate that about you. You're golden brown and crispy coming out of the fryer every time, brother.
Every time.
The problem is that benefits the company because I have two of my best people in my aces in places, so to speak, which we all subscribe to. We all agree is the best idea. What kind of stimulation are you getting being on the exact same station, doing the exact same thing every day, all day? What's that do to your psyche as far as vertical integration, as far as developing and expanding your repertoire of skills? How do you feel as an employee and your motivation, knowing that you're just going to go in, go through the motions, rock it out like the beast you are and go home? I would argue for a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe that's satisfying because you're king of the hill at that point in time. But after a while, it wears on you, right? Like you start playing the what if game. And you're not being developed. You're not being invested in. You're just a cog in a machine, and that's all you'll ever be. That's the downside for me. And I've seen that happen millions of times, and I've taken advantage of people like that.
But I think that's where you need to know your employee. And there's a certain number of employees that have other stressors in their life that love to be that fry cook and want to do that every day.
100%.
And know it's consistent for the next 10 years. And then I see people try to push that person to open their horizons. And maybe you can, depending on what their personal life looks like. But then you'd have someone like me. So I'm 45 minutes into the first shift and I was like, all right, like, what can I do next? Yeah. Like, can I do the deep fryer and the grill? And I want to do some sous chef stuff too at the same time. Like, I want to keep moving. But
so how happy are you if I plant you on the same station time in and time again, just because you're the best on that station? You gonna be satisfied?
I'm dying inside.
Right. And there's some employees that are happy being complacent, and those as a manager, they're nice to have because you need those.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I call it like you've got everybody, in every company, there's the clock in, clock out people, there's the above and beyond people, there's the, you've got all these things, but this makes me think back to what you said a little bit earlier, Anthony, is that, when you don't know your people, when you know your people, Brian's probably not happy, and maybe you've got to let him know, like, hey man, I need you to grind this out for, another 30 days because we're going to make a new hire and we're going to try to get you somewhere else because I know you really want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if I don't give a shit about Brian and he's just an employee doing a job and I don't care, Brian's going to be miserable and potentially eventually leave. And then we're going to go, what happened? I thought Brian was so good at the fries. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
Because we didn't know our people.
Well, that's it.
This goes to something you guys said earlier. You as the owner, can you manage a manager? And, you need to make sure that manager understands his people. And maybe, as the owner, you're talking to all the staff, but you're not really getting to know them. That manager needs to really know the ins and outs of that person as their career goals and what they want to do.
No, it's clear expectations. You got to know what your people want and where they want to go. You know what I mean? If you don't know that, like you're going to struggle because you're not going to know, how is somebody going to continue to come into work and do a job if you don't know where they want to be? You know what I mean? So that's, and I know we started off this as like an aces in places, but then we came back to, maybe a different spot of like, really knowing your people and employees, but that could be, that's huge. So
that was a little bait and switch, Dave. I mean, the fact is aces in places is something that most people subscribe to and thinks a good idea. And I really wanted to dissect this topic because A, I think it is a good idea. So I wanted to reiterate that. And B, also we need to be aware and cautious of the downsides of it. And it's important. It's not just as simple as that, but I think what I spoke about earlier was, we often leverage the employee talent to benefit the company only. And I think the best leaders find a way to leverage the employee's talent, not only to benefit the company, but also the employee at the same time. And that's really the tough balance you got to find. But in doing some research, I found out Starbucks was up to something cool. And I'm not sure if this is national or local, but sometimes you get down these rabbit holes and chat boards and comment threads. And what they were doing was their best employees were on their best stations at the most important times. So at peak business, they put their aces in places, right? So that'd be Friday and Saturday in restaurants for the most part. And then on the Mondays and Tuesdays, so long as you don't suffer any quality or compromise, which it should be easier to achieve your brand standard on a slower night, you would think, then you let those employees flex their muscles elsewhere on those days, and that's important because then you're feeding their desires. You're feeding their whims and their ego, getting them, cross-trained and stuff, but you're still protecting the company at the same time when it matters the most. So I don't think you can go into this with just an aces and places mentality 100% of the time. I think you need to be flexible and keep, again, the axes of employee satisfaction and company satisfaction in mind 100% of the time, and try to find that slope that's right in the middle that benefits both of you. And I think then you're built for success.
No, I love that. I think that's a great conclusion to this. I wanted to throw out, like, if there's anything that we're talking about in these episodes that inspires you to reach out, or you want to know more about, or you feel like we can help out. Like I know I don't want this to be an empty promise. Like, we really want to help. So whether it's reaching out on LinkedIn or reaching out, I mean, we just talked about it a little bit ago that we've had, quite a bit of chatter coming back at us about, what we're doing with this podcast. And so, don't sit back and think that, you're just listening to this. And if you don't quite understand, or you don't, like reach out to us. We really want to help no matter what aspect of the business you're in. We've got some great knowledge here, between the three of us, and a lot of resources behind us that you guys don't see. So please reach out if you've got any questions, and also, follow us on all the social media so you can keep up with, what we're putting out. So.
Yeah, well put, Dave. It's absolutely true. It's 100% genuine. I truly just want to help people.
Absolutely.
No, and if you're looking for another great resource, this is the book I mentioned earlier, Gino Wickman's Traction. It has the right person, right seat. Right person, wrong seat is the other thing he talks about. It's definitely worth checking out. We'll put a link to the book in the show notes. But Anthony has great notes that he is able to put on the website. I encourage you to go to the website and check out those notes, because not only are there good information in the notes, but there's also other resources. Last week's episode, we had, I think, 4 different Excel spreadsheets that you can download. So really check that out. Those are great resources, 100% free. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to put in your email, but check out the website and let us know if there's anything that we can do for you guys, because we appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate you sharing, and we appreciate those 4.5 star reviews.
Oh, it'll be 5 after today, guys. Don't get yourself
like
down. Don't get yourself down. 1 week you were 4.5. It's okay. It's all right. So, all right, guys, be well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much,
care,
everyone.
fellas.
This is a high quality pod. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Adios.
Thank you for listening to Restaurantopia. The gratitude that we have for each and every one of you spending your precious time to listen to this podcast is immeasurable. Please make sure to tell a friend about this podcast. And also, if you have any feedback for us, visit us on restaurantopia.com and drop us a line. You can also subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Thank you, and have a great day.
Cloud. Yep. We're recording now. We're good.
Man, we missed all that. I can't believe it.
It's probably for the better.
I still think we should have called the show The Bald and the Beautiful.
The phone's off the hook, but you're not.
That's funny.
This goes to something you guys said earlier.